Hello and welcome to another episode of Now About That with James and Sarah. I'm James.
And I'm Sarah.
And on today's episode, we're going to do a quick catch up and see how things are going. And then we'll talk a little bit about this month's topic, which is, Women's History Month. Jeez, I don't know where my brain just went.
I was like, are you waiting for me to say it?
No, I don't know what just happened to my brain just then. But so first of all, Sarah, how are things going?
They're going pretty well, actually. I had an interview yesterday for a patient services specialist position, which is essentially a front desk position at a rehab center, a physical rehab center. And I'd be doing a lot of the same work that I'm already doing, which is like scheduling patients, checking people in and out, cashiering, blah, blah, blah. But it also includes some things that I used to do when I worked as a pharmacy technician. So I'm pretty excited about that. I had my second interview with them today, and they have told me that they really like me and they think that I would be a good fit for the team and that they do want to move forward with hiring me. So I just have to wait until Monday when I hear from them on the official offer letter and whatnot.
Well, that's exciting.
That's when I'll find out how much money they're offering me and that kind of thing. Either way, regardless, I know that I'm going to get more than $18 an hour, but their base with no experience at all is $18 an hour, which is 50 cents more than I'm making right now.
As an assistant manager?
Correct.
Wow.
I mean, $17.50 as the assistant general manager where I am now.
That's gross. That's just barely more than what Ryan was making when he worked as just a tasting room associate in California.
Yeah. And I have been doing everything that I've had to do, only making $17.50 an hour. I make less than I make less than everybody else in the clinic. Everybody else in the clinic makes more money than I do, including the front desk associates.
Gross.
Mm-hmm.
What a terrible place to work.
What a fucking awful company to work for.
I mean, thankfully, you won't have to work there anymore.
Exactly. Monday is it. Monday is my last day.
That's good.
So I'm gonna enjoy a nice little break from having to work. And by break, I mean I'm going to be focusing on my schoolwork and everything, and driving, delivery driving. I don't know what is happening.
I'm trying to look at the second web page and it just keeps glitching.
That sucks.
It was weird. All right. Let me see if I can fix it real quick because that was weird.
So anyway,
I've had so many computer issues this week. Not with my work computer. Yeah, every time I put it in the split screen mode, the Oprah Daily page just freaks out. I'm gonna share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about.
I was gonna say it's working fine for me.
Well, it stopped because it went out of. That's annoying. Sure, this is. See, there it goes.
What is it doing?
I don't know. I guess it doesn't like to be in that mode. That's insane.
Well.
Anyways, I'm sure this is thrilling for the people that are on the call or listening. So that'll be.
Yeah. But anyway, so Monday is my last day. And I'm going to catch up on work, schoolwork, see if I can get my grades up. And I'm going to drive for Uber Eats and Grubhub and all that jazz.
Well, that's good. At least you'll have a little bit of time before you start your new job to work and focus on your school stuff.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It'll be nice because I'll also have an opportunity to just take a break.
Yeah.
And not have to worry about anything that's going on at that place. I'm very excited about that. So how about you? How was your week?
It was good. Kind of, I'm really kind of over dealing with the supervisors at the facility. So I'm at the point where I'm kind of just tired of dealing with them. So I do as little as I can with them as possible. And like, it's getting to the point where we were talking about it today in our team meeting. And I was like, one of the topics we're going to talk to them about on Tuesday is their development. And if like, Karen was like, well, what would you want to talk to them about? I was like, I would really look at firing them all and making them reapply for their position. Because very few of them are doing the job properly. The ones that are good ones, but the ones that aren't, it's like, how do you function on a daily basis? It's crazy. So that was fun. We had our employee resource group fair on Tuesday, which was really fun, and a lot of people stopped by our booth, and we did a trivia game where people were learning or answering questions about LGBTQ history. And then I sent out the name of the winners on Wednesday. Let me see if I can find it. So the questions were pretty simple, and they were all like based on, like I said, LGBT history. So the first one was, which city is considered the birthplace? Oh no, sorry. The first one was, what does LGBTQ stand for? And my question, or the answers, I tried to make this one really, really easy. There were still some people that got it wrong. I think some people guessed like jokingly, because one of the questions was, or one of the answers was like, let's go back to Quincy, because LGBTQ. And then one of the answers was, let's get a bacon tomato quiche.
Ooh. Okay.
And so someone answered that. But as everyone on here, or everyone that listens to this hopefully knows, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning, depending on who you ask. And then the second question was, which city is considered the birthplace of the modern LGBTQ rights movement in the United States? I had several options. There was San Francisco, there was Indianapolis, Boston, but the answer is New York City, from the June 28th, 1969 Stonewall Uprising. So it's considered the birthplace of the modern LGBTQ movement. And then the next question was, who is often credited as one of the key figures in the early LGBTQ rights movement and is known for her involvement in the Stonewall Uprising? I did mess up there because the answers, I had Abraham Lincoln, Milk Harvey, Madonna, and Marsha P. Johnson. So there, based on the question itself, two people are automatically eliminated.
Right.
So it's really between Marsha P. Johnson and Madonna. And it's like, Madonna, no, it's Marsha P. Johnson.
It's obviously Marsha P. Johnson, yes.
Who we'll talk about today, too.
Yes.
And then the other one one of the other ones is, which year did the World Health Organization remove homosexuality from its list of mental disorders? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't.
So until 1992, a person that identified as homosexual would be considered someone with a mental disorder. And I even looked into it, and it's the common treatments included electroshock therapy and lobotomies as treatments for these instances.
Okay.
And then I had a question about the LGBTQ flag and what the color orange represents in the flag. So did you know that each color represents a different thing?
I did, but I don't remember all the meanings.
So there are, in the traditional flag, there are 6 colors. The red represents life or vitality. Orange represents healing. Yellow represents sunlight. Green represents nature. Blue or indigo represents serenity, and violet represents spirit.
Good.
And then I just have 3 more, and then we'll move on to the actual topic. In which countries is it illegal to be openly gay and can be punishable by death? There were a few of them listed. So Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Yemen were all listed as options, and then all of the above or none of the above. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, some people put none of the above. But then again, some of them didn't speak very much English, so they were just guessing anyways. But all three of those, it is punishable by death. And then there are 69 nations where homosexuality remains illegal in some form still in 2024. Then the last three questions. What year was Don't Ask, Don't Tell repealed, allowing members of the armed services to serve openly? Do you remember when that was?
Vaguely, because I remember it happening.
Yeah. So it was introduced in 2010. So that's the answer that was on the website that I was looking for. Mm-hmm. However, it wasn't signed passed and then signed by Barack Obama until 2011.
So only 13 years ago.
Yeah. So until then, anyone that identified or was caught would be dishonorably discharged and would no longer be. It would be ineligible to receive benefits other veterans would still have access to, like healthcare, college credits, or college grants, and other benefits that they would no longer have access to because they were dishonorably discharged.
Yeah, but the military doesn't care when it's rape. They just care if you're gay.
Yeah. And then the original pride flag had which two colors? So what were two colors that, like, the very first iteration of the flag had that it no longer does?
Did it have pink and white before?
It was hot pink, yes, and turquoise.
Turquoise, okay. Yeah. That's fair.
And then when I looked it up, it's because they removed hot pink because it was difficult to produce, like mass produce, the dye for hot pink.
That makes sense.
And then they removed turquoise because they wanted to keep it an even number on the flag. So blue and purple were already there, so they got rid of turquoise. Mm-hmm. And then the last one, and then we can move on to women's history. Is Philadelphia added which two colors to their pride flag in 2017? So it's one of the most iterations, and it's called the Progress Pride flag.
Yes, I know which one you're talking about. So I believe it adds black and brown.
Yeah, they were black and brown were added to represent persons of color, and those were most of the people that did the trivia got like 5 questions right. So it was right around the medium or the mean. The most common answer or most common number correct was 5. So 5 out of 10 answers. The person that answered the most correct got 9 correct. And then the next 2, because we were giving away 3 prizes, they got 8 out of 10.
Nice.
So it was fun, and everybody had a good time. We had some stuff that we were giving out, and then the little trivia quiz that we were doing as well.
I love that.
So it was a fun week, and tonight we are recording almost 2 hours later than we typically do because Sarah had to work late.
I did. Since it's the last days that I'm going to be at work, I had to be a little more flexible with my scheduling.
Did you?
Yeah. And by I had to be, I mean, it was out of my control, and I was told this was when I was working. So, oh my God. It was so funny. I wish you could have been there watching my boss scramble, trying to figure out what she was going to do, because I told her multiple times, I am only going to stay on here temporarily if I don't have another job by the time like my end date comes up.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, do not count on me being here. And what did she do? She put me on the schedule all the way through the end of March. And I'm like, so then when I messaged her last night and said, hey, I've been offered another position and I'm going to take it. And my last day is Monday. She apparently was in full panic mode this morning. I'm just like, I kept telling her.
I mean, she had ample time.
She chose to hire people who couldn't start until 10 days after I was supposed to be gone.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. It's kind of crazy.
That's on her.
Yeah.
Because I gave plenty of notice.
Well, you want to get into the topic of something a little bit more exciting and interesting than your crazy, crappy job that you will no longer have to deal with after next week?
Yes.
So which one do you want to look at first? Because I sent you both of them. Do you want to look at the Oprah Winfrey one?
I was thinking we could start with the other one.
Okay. So we have two articles that we're looking at. One of them is from Refinery 29, and it is titled 9 Amazing Transgender Women Who Changed History. And in no surprise, the very first one is talking about Marsha P. Johnson, who lived from 1945 to 1992. And she is a transgender woman, person of color, that was also a drag queen. And she is credited with one of the people that started the first brick at the Stonewall Uprising in 1969. We've talked about a little bit beforehand, but she also continued with her activist work and co-founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or Star House, with I'm assuming Rivera is the second person on the list.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Who were both sex workers and homeless for much of their life. So she was a very influential person in the LGBTQ plus movement while she was around and alive, even working with AIDS advocacy groups, the AIDS advocacy group ACT UP, until her death in 1992.
One thing that I do want to say about the reason, just to cut anybody off at the pass, if you are not supporting all of your sisters, you are. Oh no, hold on 1 second. Do you hear the beep?
I hear. Yeah. Is fire alarm? Smoke alarm?
Yes, our fire alarm's going off. Hold on 1 second, let me check to see what's going on.
We'll pause. All right, we can continue. Sarah's house is not burning down.
But what I was saying was, before I was really interrupted by the fire alarm, is that trans women are women and therefore should be celebrated during Women's History Month, because trans women are women, trans men are men, and non-binary peeps are valid. And if you don't agree with that, you can fuck right off and listen to a different podcast. Anywho, so the next person on the list is...
What Sarah said. Yeah.
So the next person on the list is the lovely Sylvia Rivera, who lived from 1951 to 2002. Like Johnson, Sylvia was at the Stonewall Uprising in 1969, and she is credited with being one of the first to confront the police. She and Johnson later started Star House to offer support and shelter to young transgender and gender non-conforming people who were living on the streets, who experienced essentially what they did. Marsha and I just decided it was time to help each other and help our other kids, Rivera told Leslie Feinberg for her 1998 book, Trans Liberation. We fed people and clothed people. We kept the building going. She and Johnson funded Star House through sex work and were able to keep it going for a few years before the landlord eventually threw them out. After Star House fell through, Rivera continued to be a strong voice for transgender people of color. She was Hispanic. She fought against transgender exclusion in New York's Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act. She unfortunately lost. SONDA does not protect people based on gender identity. And she spoke out against systemic poverty, racism, homophobia, and gender discrimination. She died in 2002, but her legacy lives on in the work of the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, an organization dedicated to increasing the political voice and visibility of low-income people and people of color who are transgender, intersex, or gender nonconforming.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have heard more about Marsha P. Johnson than I have Sylvia Rivera. So I'm surprised that I hadn't heard more about Sylvia Rivera than Marsha P. Johnson, because they worked so closely together for so long. So that's strange.
One of the things I've previously researched Sylvia Rivera and the Stonewall Uprising, obviously. And there's not a lot of information about her.
Yeah.
Available. It's hard to find information about her. And I'm wondering if part of that is because she's being misgendered elsewhere. So it's possible that articles misgendered her and used her dead name instead.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
I'm not sure. But I do know it was a lot harder to find information about Sylvia than it was about Marsha P. Johnson.
No. So the next woman on the list is Christine Jorgensen. She was born in 1926 and lived until 1989. And then in 1952, Christine Jorgensen became the first person to publicly transition from male to female in the United States. She was born and raised in the Bronx and served as an Army clerk pre-transition, according to her New York Times obituary. In the early 1950s, Jorgensen learned about a Danish doctor, Christian Hamburger, probably. Who was experimenting with gender therapy using hormones. She began taking hormone injections and traveled to Denmark a couple of years later, where Dr. Hamburger performed gender confirmation surgery on Jorgensen. She named herself after the doctor, choosing to call herself Christine in honor of him. That's nice.
That's so cute.
When Jorgensen came back from Denmark, she made the national news with the headline, XGI becomes blonde beauty, in Jorgensen's hometown paper of the New York Daily News. And she was a tabloid sensation overnight. And rather than shying away from publicity, Jorgensen embraced it. And she began singing in nightclubs. And her theme song was, "I enjoy being a girl." And then she has a statement, according to the New York Times, where she said, "I decided if they wanted to see me, then they would have to pay for it." She did die of cancer in 1989 at 62 years old.
Sad.
I have heard about Christine Jorgensen as well. I've heard that quote, the national news article. Actually, it was in the book that I read, The Prayers for Bobby. They talked about it a little bit. So I have heard that, where it was an interesting conversation that they included in that book about the diversity and like the coming to terms with what gay was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I knew about Christine as well. I think I had read an article talking about her and how she had transitioned, because the reason that I had learned this information was because I was fighting with somebody on the internet. I don't even remember who, but I was fighting with somebody.
You fighting with someone on the internet? I never.
I know. I so rarely cause arguments on the internet. I've never been a controversial public figure or anything like that. But anyway, so somebody had said the erroneous statement that being trans was new, and I was like, no, it's not. It's not new. It's not new at all.
No, like,
and
I think
was one of those people.
Yeah, I've read that. I've heard people say that a lot. It's like, oh, this is a new phenomenon. It's like, no, it's not. We're talking about, like, we just talked about Christine Jorgensen, who it was in the 50s that she transitioned. And it's like, that's not new. And it was happening in, like, they talk about it all the time, in both Native American culture, in like African culture. So it's not new. Like, it's happened. It's happened forever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, being trans, being gay, those things have been around for eons. As long as people have been people, those things have been around. It's just that the way that we handle things has changed. Anyway, the next person is Lily Elby, who was born in 1882 and passed away in 1931. While Christine Jorgensen was the first to publicly transition from male to female in the U.S., Danish painter Lily Elby was the first to have gender confirmation surgery in Denmark. And she did it decades before Jorgensen. As she writes in her autobiography, Man into Woman, Elby's feelings of gender dysphoria were unlocked when she posed as a woman for her wife, Gerda, who was also a painter. When a model didn't show up to sit for Gerda, Elby took her place and felt at home wearing women's clothing. She continued to model as a woman for Gerda and later began wearing women's clothing even when she wasn't modeling. In the 1920s and 30s, Elby regularly dressed in women's clothing outside of the house and to entertain guests. She was sometimes introduced as her own sister. In 1930, Elby traveled to Germany for a then very experimental gender confirmation surgery, making her one of the first people on record to ever get one. She died a year later, though, after an attempt to give her a transplanted uterus went wrong. So
there's a very good movie about this entire thing called The Danish Girl.
However, I will say that it is problematic.
Yes.
In that they use a cis man to play a trans woman, which is not okay. But yes, I have heard a lot of good things about the movie.
I will say he does do a very good job, and he's very even though he is a cis man and it should have been played by a trans woman, he does a very good job, and he's very respectful of and he did research.
And that does help.
Yeah.
But yes, I am one of those people who believes that if you're going to be playing a historical figure who was trans and or gay, that because historically trans people and gay people have had to be closeted in acting, that those roles should be given to trans and gay people.
No. And I agree. I think sometimes when if there's no one available, telling the story is more important than not.
And I can understand that. It's just, my problem is that they don't really go looking.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
He was a pretty big name at the time anyway. So he was, it was more, he was willing to do it, and he was a big name. So it was they wanted to make sure it would make money as well.
Yeah.
So the next one is, I don't know how to say the name.
Coconel, I think.
That's what I was going to say too. So Coconel, born in 1931 and lived until 2006. Wow. Jacqueline Charlotte Dufresnoy, yeah. Was French actress and singer. So she was a French actress and singer. She took the name Coconel in 1953 when she began performing in drag at a nightclub and her mother sold flowers, where her mother sold flowers. A few years later, in 1958, she traveled to Casablanca to have gender confirmation surgery and became a sensation when she returned to France. Like Jorgensen and Elby, she was the first in her country to publicly transition from male to female. After her transition, Coconel continued to sing and became a movie star as well, starring in 6 films between 1959 and 1968. She legally married 3 different men over her lifetime and died in 2006 at the age of 75. That's a really gorgeous picture too.
It is a really gorgeous picture. I agree. For those of you who are listening, she's in a bridal gown with these long white gloves. She's holding some flowers. She's got a nice veil and a nice headpiece. She looks stunning. She actually looks a little bit like Marilyn Monroe in that picture.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
The next person on our list is Angie Extravaganza, who was born in 1964 and unfortunately passed away in 1993 when she was only 28. She rose to the top of one of the houses in New York City's drag ball culture, the House of Extravaganza. As house mother, Extravaganza acted as a role model to other transgender women and gay men in her house. She and other house mothers were featured in the 1990 documentary Paris is Burning. In the documentary, she talks about the dangers of living as a transsexual, what we would call transgender today, in New York City, after a friend and drag daughter of hers was murdered. Only a few years after her drag daughter was killed, Extravaganza died of complications from AIDS. She'd lived for over 10 years as her own creation, author Michael Cunningham wrote after her death. A ferocious maternal force who turned tricks in hotel rooms over a bar called the Cock Ring and who made chicken soup for the gaggle of friends she called her kids after they came home from a long night on the town. And so it always makes me so sad because a lot of the people on this list, unfortunately, died fairly young.
Yeah.
Like Marsha P. Johnson was not very old. She died in 1992. So I can't do math in my head. So Marsha died at 47, Sylvia lived longer because Sylvia passed away in 2002. But she was also a little younger than Marsha. But she was only 51 still. And then Christine was also only in her 50s. And then Lily Elby was only 40. She hadn't even hit 50 yet.
Yeah, and it's probably partially like there's two reasons that kind of stand out, because the procedures that they're doing to make themselves into the gender that they know that they are were experimental at the time and very dangerous is part of the issue. And then the other one, like there's obviously the nightclub scene, there's drugs and those things, but then there's also Extravaganza, Angie Extravaganza, and then the person I'm getting ready to talk about, the AIDS epidemic is a big one too. So there's in the 90s, it's when like 80s and 90s is when it kind of started going crazy. And the next person we're talking about is Dorian Corey, was another drag mother in New York City and one whom Angie Extravaganza cited as her inspiration. She founded and led voguing House of Corey and won more than 50 grand prizes in voguing balls over her lifetime. She was featured in Paris's Burning alongside Extravaganza and other drag mothers, and everyone wants to, she said, everyone wants to leave something behind them. So some mark upon the world. But then you think you've left a mark on the world Sorry, I'm going to start this sentence over. Everyone wants to leave something behind them. Some impression, some mark upon the world. But then you think you've left a mark on the world if you just get through it and have a few people remember your name. Corey died of complications from AIDS in 1993 and certainly left her mark on the world. A few months after her death, police discovered the partially mummified body of a convicted rapist inside a trunk in her apartment. He had been shot in the head at least 20 years prior, and the wild story has since inspired multiple plays.
Yeah, I have heard. I'm trying to remember who talked about it. I think it was Mike from that chapter who talked about Dorian Corey and the body in the trunk.
Yeah.
And I was just like, there was a body in the trunk? And they have no idea. They have no idea whether she was the one who killed him or if somebody else killed him and she just was covering up for them or what. Nobody knows.
I have a feeling it was, if she walked in on it and saw it happen, she probably did it, or she was such a motherly figure that one of her daughters or drag children did it because he was attacking them and raped them, and she just helped dispose of the body. Well, hide the body. Not really dispose of it, apparently.
Yeah, didn't dispose of it, just kind of hung on to it.
Yeah.
The next...
Even 20 years. Wow. She hid that body for 20 years.
She hid the body for 20 years. And one of the things that I remember when I was listening to whomever it was, I'm pretty sure it was Mike from that chapter. Shout out to that chapter podcast. I love them. Anyway, where they talked about one of the main things is Dorian Corey was a woman of color as well as being trans. And so it's entirely possible that the reason that she hung on to the body was because she couldn't afford to get caught.
Yeah.
And like, how was she supposed to dispose of it in a place like New York? You know, and being that she was trans, she was obviously a more noticeable figure around town. And so there wasn't a lot of secrecy where she would have been safe to be able to dispose of the body, or even go to the police if it was a case of she was the one getting attacked and it was self-defense. Like New York is one of the worst states when it comes to especially over policing of people of color.
Yeah.
And that has always been true. So our next person is Roberta Cowell, who got to live to a ripe old age. She was born in 1918 and passed away in 2011 at the age of 93, which is that just makes me so happy. Roberta Cowell is credited as Britain's first transsexual woman. Again, older language, we don't really use transsexual anymore, because she, like Elby and Jorgensen, was one of the first people to ever undergo a gender confirmation surgery. And then she also had an incredible life before her transition. So she was a race car driver and a pilot. She served as an airman in the military, was shot down, became a POW, prisoner of war, in 1944 during World War II. She and several other prisoners were rescued several months later in 1945, and she repatriated to the UK. I don't remember what that word means, but anyway, just a few years after the war, Cowell left her family, a wife and 2 daughters, to seek help for depression. Working with psychiatrists, she eventually realized that her unconscious mind was predominantly female, and she began taking large doses of estrogen, and later met transgender medical student Michael Dillon, who would perform her first gender confirmation surgery. Cowell returned to racing and flying after her transition in the 1950s, and she lived a long life.
That's interesting that she was able to do that in the 40s and 50s and still like maintain the lifestyle that she had at the time.
Right. Like, that's crazy. That's amazing. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting life, and repatriated. It just basically means she went back to the US or the UK.
Oh. I don't. Why did she need to repatriate? She was already a citizen. She was a prisoner of war.
I think it's because she was like being held as a prisoner for so long. Oh, I guess it was just a year. But she returned to the UK. I mean, returned would be the better term probably there. Yeah, she didn't really like become a citizen of another country. And that's usually what it means when you repatriate, is you go back to your citizenship from the country you were born in. Mm-hmm. So it's a weird term to use there, but this was also in 2018. So some of the like transsexual, transvestite, those words we don't really use anymore, and they're kind of taboo to use now. Mm-hmm. Well, not just taboo, but also kind of wrong and shouldn't be used. So for those of you that are listening, this is the information we're speaking is from an article that was in 2018. So these aren't terms that we would typically use.
Correct.
Currently.
But they are the terms that were accurate to that time frame.
Right. So yeah, if they're saying them, I mean, it's their terms, they own them. So that makes sense. But personally, we wouldn't say them in 2024. And then the last person on this list is Renee Richards. She was born in 1934 and is currently still living. Long before Caitlyn Jenner, who we will not talk about. Mm-hmm. Pro tennis player Renee Richards shook up the sports world when she came out as a transgender woman, and she made even greater waves later when she returned to tennis and sued the United States Tennis Association, the Women's Tennis Association, and the United States Open Committee for her right to compete as a woman. Although she was one of the first to take on that battle and win, Richards doesn't consider herself a pioneer. She told GQ in 2015 that if anything, she was a reluctant pioneer. I was not an activist. It was a private act for my own self-betterment, for what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and play tennis, she said, I wanted to go and play tennis, and I wanted to stand up for the right to, oh my gosh, I cannot read. And I wanted to stand up and say what I was. The gay world considers me a pioneer, and I'm proud that they do. But do I lie in bed thinking I was a pioneer? No, I don't. So that's a statement from And I'll probably record this later and redo that entire statement because that was horrible. And then, as Richards told GQ, being a transgender woman isn't her whole identity and she doesn't want it to be. I have no doubt that when I die, the obituary headline is going to be transsexual tennis player Renee Richards dies. She said, I realize that being the pioneer for other transsexual people or other downtrodden, disenfranchised people of any type is very important, but it's really a very small part of my life.
And really quick, because I just looked something, I was just looking her up because she was the only person on this list that I had not heard of. And one of the cool things about her is after she retired from playing tennis, she coached Martina Navratilova, the famous Czech American professional tennis player, to 2 Wimbledon titles. And her mother was one of the first female psychiatrists in the United States.
I honestly don't know why we don't talk more about. I mean, I guess the other person was an Olympic athlete, which I think is maybe, and then obviously connection to the Kardashians is probably why they get talked about. She gets talked about more than Renee Richards does. But I say, let's make an effort to lift up Renee Richards, even though she kind of really doesn't want people to lift her up. So maybe not. But I would prefer to talk more about Renee Richards than the other athlete.
Exactly. I agree wholeheartly. Because fuck her.
Yeah. So as to not make this a 2-hour long episode, do you want to talk about a few of the women on the Oprah Women's History Month 2024 list? And then we can take a look at some more in the next episode, since it's still Women's History Month with the next episode.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel like several of these we do not deserve to be talked about.
Margaret Thatcher? You don't want Margaret Thatcher on here?
No, fuck Margaret Thatcher. I hope she's enjoying hell. Also, nobody gives 2 fucks about Melinda Gates. Okay.
I will say I think she did a good thing where her and Bill Gates got divorced, she did donate a lot of her money that she got from the divorce to things like LGBTQ activist groups. And they have their foundation that gives to those types of groups.
I understand, but also fuck her.
I mean, I do agree there are some women that are on this list. I think it's less that they're amazing, and more that they had an impact, whether it was a great impact or a bad impact. All of the women on this list had some sort of impact, and made some sort of change in the world. I think, I mean, my thing, Shonda Rhimes, she makes great movies and all that, great TV shows, not movies, great TV shows and all that. But she's a very problematic woman too.
No, agreed. There are some women on here that I do feel like deserve, to be on a list, and like Marie Curie and Nellie Bly, and but like I was telling, who was I telling? I was telling Nick the other day, because we went and watched a movie, which I completely forgot to talk about.
Oh yeah.
We went and saw Imaginary. Anyway.
Ooh, we'll talk about that at the end, because I want to hear how it was.
But at the beginning, they were doing like a little montage of, women, for Women's History Month, and they were all actresses. Like, they were all people who are famous for being like pretty. And they weren't even like all people who like do philanthropy. Like, I would have been fine if it had been Angelina Jolie. She's constantly donating money. She's, going to those places and, helping people. But I was just over here going, okay, and like, how is this women's history actually women's history when you're literally just upholding people who support the current beauty standards and are essentially famous for just being in movies, just being pretty in a movie. Like that's not something I feel like we need to be celebrating.
Yeah. Who were some of them, the women?
Who was some of the women? I know that they had Oprah on there, which I have a lot of problems with Oprah. Which I'm saying that while we're reading this list from Oprah. But that's one of the reasons why I disagree with some of the people on the list is because there are a few people on here who like Melinda Gates and like Margaret Thatcher. Like, what? Anyway, I also don't feel like Hillary Clinton deserves to be on this list, to be honest. But like, it was just extremely frustrating. I think Meryl Streep was on there, and I was like, Meryl Streep's a great actress, but like, tell me something impactful that Meryl Streep has done besides Sophie's Choice. Like off the top of your head without looking it up. I know you're looking it up.
I have no idea. That's the thing.
Exactly.
I wouldn't know.
That's the problem.
But the thing with that is I don't pay that close attention either. So it's like, it's not, I mean, she does
pay close attention and I can't tell you anything impactful she's done.
Well, before I looked it up, I did know that she has been like very outspoken about pay equality.
And do we have pay equality?
Well, no, but like, I mean, you can't say it's not happened doesn't mean she can't be outspoken about it.
If that's the only reason that she's on the list, that's not a good reason. Because I also am outspoken about pay equality. Am I on anybody's list? No. That's what I'm saying is like, just because you're like here and there, you're like, oh, well, this is important. That does not mean that you've had an impact on it, that you've done something to change something, or that you've been the first to do something. Like, be serious. But anyway, the ones that I was most interested in talking about were number 1 and number 8, number 10, and number 11. Those were the ones that I like saw as I was like scrolling down that I for sure wanted to talk about.
Well, do you want to talk about number 1 first?
Yeah. All right. So I know I was just saying the thing about being actresses and whatnot and just being pretty. However, this is the exception, not the rule. So Anna May Wong, she was born 1905 and she died in 1961. Anna May Wong was the first Asian American movie star in Hollywood. So she broke through the color barrier for Asian people. Her talent earned her roles in over 50 domestic and foreign films, and she was also the first Asian American to star in a TV show, which was The Gallery of Madame Lu Song. And a year before her death, she was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, becoming the first Asian American woman to receive one. And in 2022, the U.S. Mint began producing quarters with Wong's face as part of the American Women Quarters program, which we've talked about before. They started the program in the middle of a change shortage.
And then they ended it. Yeah.
But I have seen some of the quarters. I took pictures of some of the quarters that I have found that have Anna May Wong's face and other women in history. And if you want to learn more about Anna May Wong, you can watch the documentary Anna May Wong in Her Own Words, which is on Prime.
Look at you giving Amazon a plug, Sarah.
I mean, fuck Amazon, fuck Jeff Bezos. Every single day, Jeff Bezos could end world hunger and still have money left over. He would still be rich.
It's insane that we have any homelessness or world hunger, and there are so many billionaires in the world. That is the biggest crock of shit in the world.
Oh, Taylor Swift was on the list. And I was like, Taylor Swift? You mean the billionaire who is spending, who's putting so much carbon emissions out into the atmosphere by riding her private jet back and forth to see her boyfriend, her latest boyfriend?
She also is donating a bunch of money and doing a lot of activism with trans rights.
But she's not doing enough that she's still a billionaire. Nobody needs to be a billionaire. Kill and eat the rich. Anyway, continue.
I couldn't remember what other numbers you said.
Number 8, 10, and 11.
Okay. So number 8 is Kalpana Chawla. So Kalpana Chawla, she was born in 1962 and died in 2003. In 1995, after being named a mission specialist on the Space Shuttle Columbia by NASA, Chawla became the first woman of Indian descent to fly to space. The shuttle orbited around Earth 252 times in a little over 2 weeks. Her second and last trip to space came in 2003 when she and 6 other astronauts completed more than 80 experiments over the course of 16 days. And when she entered she and the entire crew, wow, geez, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just tired. I cannot read tonight. She and the entire crew died when the ship disintegrated upon re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. In 2022, Northrop Grumman, I am butchering these names, an aerospace defense and security company named a spacecraft after Chawla in her memory. So she was the first woman of Indian descent to fly in space. That's cool.
Sally Ride was the first woman in space, and she was also a lesbian.
Oh yeah, I've heard about her. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Number 10 is Wilma Mankiller. She was born 1945 and passed away in 2010. In 1985, Oklahoma native Wilma Mankiller became the first woman to be principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, leading the largest tribe in the United States. During her decade-long chiefdom from 1985 to 1995, tribal enrollment grew, infant mortality dropped, and employment rates doubled, according to Time magazine. In 1998, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Bill Clinton. And there is a book about her called Mankiller, A Chief and Her People. And then the last one is number 11.
Do you want to go ahead and do number 11 too?
Yes, I will do number 11 as well. Number 11 is Nellie Bly, who was born in 1864 and died in 1922. Nellie Bly is actually one of my personal heroes. She was one of my personal heroes growing up. She was born Elizabeth Cochran. She adopted the pen name Nellie Bly to go undercover as an investigative journalist in the 1880s. Bly eventually moved to New York City and by feigning mental illness got herself committed to a notorious asylum on Blackwell's Island. Her reporting on the unfair treatments patients endured led to the New York City municipal government shelling out more money to improve conditions for the mentally ill. Bly achieved another great feat. In 1889, she traveled around the world in 72 days, setting a world record for circumnavigating the globe. And the movie, 10 Days in a Madhouse, is based on her life and legacy. But she did more than that. But she was one of the first investigative female reporters at the time. She did so much. She put herself in danger so often just to get the truth. She was very much the type of person who wanted to find out the truth and wanted to make things better. That's why she got herself committed, was so that she could see what was going on in those places and try to help those people. So yeah.
Ooh, I just went back to the first article we were reading through, and there's people commenting, and
never read the comments.
I know one of the comments in 2021. These stories are appropriate for LGBT plus, not Women's History Month. I used to support trans rights, but not when you appropriate my history, my rights, my privacy, and my dignity. Calm down.
It's not your history, your rights, your privacy, or your dignity. You're just trying to make it about yourself because you're a stupid little bitch.
No. Anyways, so we will kind of take a look at some other women of interest and women of note in next week's episode as well, as we continue through. Oh, hold on.
Coughing. He doesn't want you to know, but he's coughing.
I was, yeah. As we continue through the Women's History Month, since next week, since there's 2 more weeks after this one left. So we will try to continue some more of that information, and then we will also provide the links to the articles that we looked at in this week's episode in the description of this week's podcast. Sarah, did you want to talk about the movie?
Yes, I did. Okay, so Nick and I went and saw Imaginary, which is about imaginary friends, and it was really interesting, and it was really, I felt like a unique take. It comes from Blumhouse, which I struggle to think of a Blumhouse movie that I don't like, to be honest. They really put out some really decent horror movies. I will say some of it was a little silly to me. Because like it is centered around a stuffed bear named Chauncey.
Chauncey, I loved that name.
Chauncey, his name's Chauncey Bear. Yeah. But it was a really good movie, in my opinion. I really liked it a lot. There were a few issues that I had with it. One being that the lead person, hold on, what is her name? DeWanda Wise. Okay, lovely black woman. Was pretty much the only black woman in the whole movie. Like pretty much the only black person in the movie. There were like a couple of flashback scenes with her mom, and there were like 1 or 2 scenes with her dad. But other than that, everybody else in the cast was white. So it was like, okay. Anyway, I did not like how the teenager was allowed to behave in the movie, in particular towards another adult. And other than that, it was a pretty good movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. There were some genuinely frightening moments in it. And there was a lot of like lore and things like that about imaginary friends, which was really interesting and got me thinking about my own imaginary friends when I was a kid. So
I don't know that I remember having imaginary friends when I was a kid.
That's fair.
It currently has a 4.18 out of 10 rating on IMDb.
Yeah, but to be fair, horror movies don't usually get really good ratings.
No.
It's a struggle to get a horror movie to get above like a 5 on a website like IMDb.
That's true.
So I always kind of take those ratings with a grain of salt. But yeah, like if you like horror movies, and you're in the mood for something a little different, I would definitely recommend it. I had a good time. It was an enjoyable movie. So yeah, what do you got going on this weekend?
Absolutely nothing, and I'm going to try to stay away from anywhere over the next couple of days because it is St. Patrick's Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people around here have Irish heritage, so I'm sure it's going to be a giant freaking mess. And if we do go somewhere, Ryan even joked that on Sunday when we go for lunch somewhere, we should go to an Italian place, because if we go anywhere Irish or anything like that, it's going to be insane.
True.
Because as it's noted, the United States celebrates St. Patrick's Day even harder than Irish people.
We also celebrate Cinco de Mayo harder than Mexican people. Any excuse for Americans to get fucking drunk and pig out on food, we're there.
Yeah. It's crazy. So yeah, we're going to try to avoid people as much as possible. So tomorrow I'm probably not going to do very much, edit the podcast, and then probably just watch some movies or TV. I've been watching the Sex and the City TV series from the first season, and I never realized how problematic it actually is. Now watching it with 2024 eyes, it's like the homophobia and transphobia is rampant in this show.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like the sexism is insane.
Yeah, it's funny how a show that's about women is so fucking sexist.
Yeah. Especially when it's like the main focus on even like the first season, because I just got through the first season, is like I get it's called Sex in the City, and she's talking about a single woman in New York City in the 90s, but it's also like the only conversations that they have is about like getting like wanting to get married or wanting to find the one, and it's like that's not all life is about. So it's weird that it makes sense as to why it was so popular, but it's also kind of like now in 2024 I can kind of see how it's lost its appeal.
Yeah A lot of old shows do not hold up very well.
Yeah. And then like Will and Grace, like I loved Will and Grace. I still love Will and Grace for a lot of it, but then it's like some of the stuff, it's like it's so over the top and like stereotypical gay man and like stuff that not every single gay man is stereotypically doing.
Right.
But it is a good movie or a good show. I still find it problematic and strange that the main character isn't played by a gay actor. But
the secondary character is.
Yeah, but I do have to say the same thing with him as what I said about the guy that played. I don't remember what the actor's name is, but the guy that was in
Eddie Redmayne.
Yeah, Eddie Redmayne. He did do the role justice, and there are plenty of other gay actors included in the show.
Right.
However, the main character really probably should, since it is about Will and Grace and it is a title character, probably should have been a gay character as well.
Yeah. I just
Do you have anything else going on this weekend?
Do I have anything else going on this weekend?
How are your hives? You're scratching, I can see.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm starting to get itchy right now. But other than that, they're mostly going away.
Yeah.
I am pretty sure that it's primarily stress, because it tends to be worse when I have to get up and go to work.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm doing okay. I'm doing the best I can.
That's good. I got something that I was going to try to get to kind of help my grandmother with her phone issue, because she has an issue where she has a cell phone and it only gets service in one part of her house. And I saw this thing online that was like, you can connect your cell phone to like this receiver that basically turns it into a like a regular house phone. So you can leave your phone, like her phone, where it gets good reception, and then she can walk around with like the handheld receiver. But I got it, and I was like, I'm going to order it and try it out and see if it works the way that I want it to work first before I send it to her and have like my dad like write down instructions on how to do it and then have my dad do it. It doesn't work the way that I thought it was going to work. So that's one thing I have to do tomorrow, is take it to Staples and return it. And then probably do the business taxes. So I had to finish that.
Fun.
And then other than that, I'm probably not going to do much this weekend. Like I said,
fair, reasonable. I'm not doing much either. I'm just working my last few days for this company.
Well,
not doing that anymore.
Do you want to call it a podcast?
Yeah, I think it's a podcast.
Oh crap, I don't even have my notes up. Un momento, por favor.
Oh my God, you are so unprepared.
No. All right, let's call it a day and say thank you to the amazing women out in the world, and enjoy the rest of this week and the rest of Women's History Month. And we will talk to you next week with some more interesting and exciting women.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening to this week's episode of Now About That with James and Sarah. If you like this episode, please give us a like, a comment, and don't forget to follow and subscribe. Make sure you leave us a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, as this will help get the podcast out to more people and help us grow. And feel free to follow us on social media. If you search for us anywhere, it is at Now About That Pod on all of the social medias. So if we're not there, we don't come up in the search, then we're not on that platform. If there's a special topic that you would like us to discuss on the podcast, feel free to email us at nowaboutthatpod@gmail.com, or visit our website, www.nowaboutthatproductions.com. And you can also leave us a voicemail or send us a text message with any questions you would like us to discuss on the podcast. Our phone number is 765-557-4170. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you have a great week, since this will be coming out on Monday. And we hope you are recuperating well from St. Patrick's Day if you celebrate it.
Right.
Sarah, enjoy your weekend.
You too.
Bye, everybody.
Hasta la vista, babies.
Goodbye.